Hello, hello. My name is April Malone with Yes, I Work From Home, and this is the podcast. Today I have Yaffi Lvova with me. Did I say it right, Yaffi?
You did, thanks.
Yay! Thank you for coming. Yaffi is a local mom to me, and we met in a mom's group. And it sounds like she has a really interesting work from home journey. I know that you're doing a little bit of two things. You're working from home and in a hospital. Can you tell everyone what you do?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me, April. I'm really excited to be on the podcast. So, I am a registered dietitian nutritionist. And as we discussed prior to starting recording, that's the same thing as a registered dietitian. It's our attempt to take back the word nutritionist because it's a bit of a contentious point since there's a huge difference between registered dietitians and nutritionists.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I do work in a hospital. I work in a clinical setting 1 or 2 times a week. I have a PRN position, which just means that I'm effectively a substitute teacher and I fill in for the other dietitians who are out on vacation or maternity leave or whatever. And I also have my business from home.
Tell us what you do from home.
Well, I am also a registered dietitian, but maybe a little bit more of a crazy one because my kids have been home for 18 months. But I have a small amount of my practice is counseling people one-on-one. It's not my huge focus. I really like to focus on public speaking and writing. I did publish a number of books, mostly written in 2020 when I just turned to writing as a stress relief. And now all of a
Good.
sudden, everything's coming out at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you've got more than one book coming out?
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm my first book came out on December of 2019, and my eighth book will be coming out September of this year.
What? Okay, so are they all different?
They are different for the most part. I have two different books on baby food introduction, but one takes a baby-led weaning approach and one takes a puree approach. Both of those philosophies are philosophies that are safe, appropriate, and I believe in both of them. And people can also do a combination. So yeah,
What
those are
does
similar.
PRA stand for?
Sorry, what was that?
What does PRA stand for?
PRA?
You said there's a baby-led
Oh,
weaning,
oh,
and did I mishear you?
puree. Sorry.
Puree,
There's baby
puree.
led weaning and then the puree method. Yeah.
So like the jarred baby food type stuff.
Yeah, and
Okay.
that one has some recipes in case people want to make baby food at home. It is also perfectly fine to buy your baby food pre-made in case you want to make it from home. There are recipes in that book.
I feel like we definitely did both. And especially as the years progressed, we had our first kid was 10 and a half years ago. We started, actually, I just saw on Facebook, my memories came by, her 6 month anniversary. We didn't do any food before 6 months, and so we celebrated with giving them their first food. But yeah, her journey of eating was very different from our son. She was very interested in just nursing, and then our next kid came out and he wanted to eat. And at that point, I had learned about baby-led weaning, but I feel like I was maybe a little bit too gung-ho on aspects of it and still needed to actually, like, wait for his readiness in some areas. So, yeah, you learn a lot. And then the third came along. The third kid, I feel like, had a totally different experience and probably the most appropriate of all of them.
Yeah. And you know what? All of their experiences were appropriate. It's amazing how different kids are and how different their personalities, their preferences, their eating styles, their interest in food, everything's different. And so it's best to take an approach that accounts for what makes you comfortable as well as what's working for the child. And that's why I have the two different books out, one on one approach and one on the other, because the truth is that there's a lot of misunderstanding when it comes to feeding babies. And part of it is just that we have been raised in a society that teaches us to not trust our bodies. And so if we can't trust our own bodies, how are we going to trust the bodies of people who came out of our bodies? That's like
Yeah.
another degree of trust. And if you can't trust the first degree, how are you going to trust your child's body to tell them what they need and how much they need and when they're done? So you know what, it's baby-led weaning is fantastic for teaching kids independence, and puree is fantastic for getting that one-on-one attention between the adult and the child. And each of them have unique benefits as far as oromuscular formation. We're forming these muscles in our mouths. And this is a really important point because a lot of people think, food before one is just for fun. It's not just for fun. It's not for nutrition, but it's not just for fun. it's really important to develop those muscles in the mouth, because that's going to be needed not only for feeding, but for speech, and
Mm.
just for getting through life. And so it's really important to get that exposure to different textures for practice manipulating them, and exposure to different tastes, so that everything is a little bit more familiar when they get older and go through that picky phase that's so natural that all kids go through.
This is really fascinating. What got you originally interested in nutrition and diet?
I've always been interested in nutrition and diet. I started doing ballet when I was 3, and being in a hobby that is so body focused, it's natural to be nutrition focused, and that goes in a very bad way for a lot of dancers. And that's why I'm thankful that I wasn't good enough to I wasn't good enough to have that pressure on me from other adults and from teachers and from other students. And I am thankful for that I didn't have to battle that. But I did have that interest in the body and how it works, and how you can treat it well. And so I've taken it this direction, and it's been great. There's so many aspects of nutrition, and it's constantly evolving. It's fascinating to stay on top of it.
So, are most of your clients that you work with babies or parents of babies?
Most of them are, well, parents, because it's really touchy talking to kids directly. I mean, especially a 6-month-old who generally is not great at answering questions. But even as they get older, even when you get into the clients who come to me for selective eating or picky eating, their kids are old enough that I could talk to them, but it's not good practice to speak directly to a child as a dietitian,
Okay.
because it's much better to support the parent. Much like a doula supports a woman giving birth and supports the couple, and is there not to support directly, but to support in the background, to help things come about naturally with the parents and how they want it to happen. Like, it's similar to that I support the parents in establishing a healthy relationship with their kids at the table, and to guiding their kids to forming a healthy relationship with food. It's much more important that message comes from a parent rather than comes from someone who the child isn't familiar with, like me.
See, I thought it was going to go a different way because sometimes I feel like my kids listen better to someone who's not me.
It really depends on the child. And also, your kids are a little bit older. And, I have spoken with a child directly, but she was 12. And
Mhm.
that for me was a big thing, to make that decision to counsel her directly at the mother's request. But it was also what the concern was. This child was not concerned about her body shape and gaining weight and all of that, which I definitely would not approach the same way. That situation was more of a direct medical situation that needed nutrition intervention, and it was very clear cut. It's very difficult to talk to kids about nutrition, and it's difficult to do it the right way.
Okay.
And a lot of times, people who have access to kids, such as teachers and even pediatricians, don't necessarily approach that conversation in a way that's healthy for that child's development, and it
Mhm.
can really lead to food obsession, and it doesn't go anywhere good from that.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you've got the two infant books or books directed towards parents of infants. What are your other books?
So the book that's focused on baby-led weaning or baby-led feeding, which are two ways to call the same thing, is Stage by Stage Baby Food Cookbook. And the next one that came out that's the puree focus is Nourishing Baby Food Cookbook. And then I have some other ones that we talked about before we got on today. I'm very excited that Beyond a Bite is coming out again. I released the first edition January of 2020, and it's a very short book on Amazon, just about food games you can play with your neurotypical child at the table. And I got it in my head we needed to rewrite it for the neurodiverse population. So that is currently out in the professional version, which I can show you right here. Very
Ooh,
exciting. So this is Beyond a Bite for the professional, and this is practical approaches to sensory and feeding challenges with autism spectrum disorder and neurodivergent clients.
that's a big book.
Professional professional books have a ton of words in the titles. I mean, like that's intense, right? So this is meant for dietitians and for speech therapists and other occupational therapists who are feeding therapists. And that is coming out as a parent edition, which is it's shorter and the title is also shorter, thank God. But it's also going to be Beyond a Bite, and that's going to come out hopefully within a month or so, and that'll be the parent version of this. The parents can have in the home to play games and interact positively with food with their child who is neurodiverse.
What about the parents who are like, I want the professional version?
You know what? It's really challenging to give them the professional version. And the truth is that the professional version, I mean, there's the major price point here. It's $140.
That'll
So I think
probably,
people
yeah.
are not going to do that. But for professionals, I mean, for me, it would be 16 continuing education units. So it's worth it to me for that price. It's not
Wow.
going to be worth it to your average parent. And honestly, it's much better for the professional to have the professional version because they can use what's in the text paired with their education and clinical experience in order to decide which direct approach to take with the family and with the child. So it's very important to have that background and that knowledge in order to use the knowledge to their best ability. In an ideal circumstance, the parents would be in feeding therapy and they have the parent edition at home and the professional has the professional edition, and they work together on that, determining how they should go with that resource at home.
So I think that's 4 books, and you said you have 4 more?
Yes. Okay. So Discover Mindful Eating for Kids was my first book that I was a contributing author for the second edition with Migret Fletcher. And that one's also meant for a professional. And Beyond a Bite actually came out of that. So that one is also meant for a professional. And then let's see, where are we in the timeline?
I
So
don't know.
Discover Mindful Eating for Kids, Beyond a Bite, the first one, Beyond the Bite, the second one, and the third one, which are neurodiverse, Nourishing Baby Food Cookbook, and um, and Kid Food. Oh, Fun with Food. Okay, so
The games?
Fun with Food, Baby Food, Toddler Food Cookbook and Activity Book. And that one was really my baby. That came out of Toddler Test Kitchen, which is my in-person cooking class for kids ages 2 through 6. And so that one is full of games and activities similar to Beyond a Bite, but a little bit more intense. And I pulled a lot of information from my friend and colleague, Danny Leibovitz, who writes a lot of books herself on fantastic, introduction to food for kids. Where do bananas come from? Where does broccoli come from? It's all done in an extremely positive way, which is so important for kids. They don't need to know always, sometimes, never foods. They don't need to know moderation. Kids don't have they don't have the ability to really understand these nuanced concepts. Their prefrontal cortex is the area of the brain right behind the forehead here. It's not developed until they're 23 to 25 years old. And that's where we get our reasoning. So teaching kids these concepts of always, sometimes, never, in moderation, they're really just going to parrot it back. They're not going to understand it because it's not developmentally appropriate to expect them to understand those concepts. So that's why we keep things very positive. So her books are very positive. My books are very positive. I always mention her books in my books because we need lots of resources for how to talk to kids in a positive way, and that's what we're both going for with that. So that's 7 books so far. So the 8th book is Kid Chef Junior Everyday Recipes, and that's a cookbook for kids who are, I'll say, 4 years old and up, but it's specifically geared towards new readers, the 6, 7-year-old range, so that they can look at the recipe and just do it all on their own.
Awesome.
And the Fun with Food Kids Cookbook before, that one actually starts at 12 months. So if you are interested in cooking with your 12-month-old, that's a good resource to start.
You mentioned an in-person class. Was that happening at the hospital, in your home, or at what point did you do that?
So Toddler Test Kitchen is about 6 years old. It is now aging out of itself because it's the classes from 2 to 6. So Currently, I have been teaching at the Farm South Mountain and at Vertuccio Farms. And it's super fun. Of course, I've been off for the past year because of the pandemic. I do plan to start up again in the fall. And if you're on my newsletter or follow me really anywhere, I'm sure I'm going to post all about it. I miss it. I mean,
Mhm.
me and 15 to 18 small children and their parents just exploring food. Introducing a small child to baby corn is like, it's just
Oh,
fun.
yeah.
Yeah, showing them spaghetti squash and they rip it apart
Mhm.
themselves, shred the spaghetti squash. It's fantastic. It's just so much fun to watch.
That does sound really cool. Now, so we are, local to each other here in Arizona, but I'm not familiar with either of those, places you mentioned. Do they have a big kitchen, or how do you is it just a big conference room, or what are you using?
We are actually on picnic tables. So the class is vegan or vegan friendly. I like to do that because a lot of kids have just food issues. Sometimes it's allergies, sometimes it's ethical or religious, and I feel like having a vegan based class is a catch all for that.
Mhm.
So we do the vegan ingredients on picnic tables, and it's very rustic. I mean, it's fun that way though. And we're outside, and that's why I don't teach during the summer because
Mhm.
right now we seem to be having a cold snap. It's only supposed to be 106 today.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Great to get out the sweaters.
That's why I'm wearing my sweater here.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, we have fun with it. Outside, it's beautiful in the fall and in the winter. You know how it is in Arizona.
Mhm.
I saw this meme. If you can't take it at 115, you don't deserve it at 78.
What?
It's true. So anyway, so those are fun venues. So Vertuccio Farms is more about fun, and they have a lot of kids play area over there. There's things to jump on. There's a train to ride, and they have farm equipment that's kind of repurposed for climbing, and they do a lot of fun stuff there. And the Farm South Mountain is a little bit more upscale. They do weddings there, but they do a lot of classes as well. They do farmers markets. Those are both fun locations.
I feel like I've possibly been to the second one. Is it closer to Phoenix?
Yeah, that's in near South Mountain.
Okay, yeah, I think I actually, when I was hosting VIP kid meetings for, ESL teachers, I think we had one there. I didn't host that one, but it was fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So outdoors, and you're basically doing the vegan because then everyone should have something that they can be comfortable with, and it's not necessarily for only vegans, but it's just it's safe for everybody.
Yeah, it's really just about safety and comfort, and I really make a big push to welcome kids who have food allergy issues. And I just say, if the parents can tell me a week in advance what those food allergies are, I will either shift the entire recipe or I will bring substitute ingredients. One time we did sesame miso ramen, which was fun, but I had a child who is allergic to soy,
Mm.
and miso is a soy-based paste. It's made from soy. So I went out and got some chickpea miso paste, and it was fine. But I just find that a lot of kids' cooking classes are very centered on cookies and cakes. And part of
Mhm.
that is because of cost, because it's much more expensive to run a Southwestern spaghetti squash recipe than it is to get a few boxes of Duncan Hines for a dollar each. I think it really comes down to that. There's also a lot of control that you have when you have a boxed mix, and you don't have to measure each individual ingredient. It's a lot easier to do something. Kids are generally familiar with that, but I like to break out of the box, and I like to make it more welcoming for kids who have different food issues. And Duncan Hines mix is just not gonna do it for the child who can't have gluten or can't have soy or can't have
Yeah.
corn. These things are in everything.
We've definitely, done a huge diet change in the past year. We discovered that one of our children, and probably we've only tested one of them, so it's probably affecting more than one, but there's a gluten sensitivity. We do have some celiac that runs in our family, so it's, getting to be pretty serious, and so we've, made some big adjustments, and with that, as a bonus, have come some really nice behavioral changes. So, not only did we change the diet, but we've noticed, like, and it could have been a multiple multiple factors working together with the pandemic starting at the same time. But we've just had a much more pleasant environment around this house. I think that when someone is sensitive to food, it doesn't always come out as like rashes or, the anaphylactic reaction. We had behavioral reactions.
Yeah.
And, we've learned over the years certain things to be careful about. But it's kind of cool in that when we did cut out gluten for the most part, they had a bigger sensitivity to corn. And I feel like corn now isn't as triggering as it had been in the past. So, yeah, we've been on a little bit of a journey. So this is all really interesting to me personally. But keep talking. I want to hear about, at what point did you start working more from home, or have you always tried to be working from home?
I was working as a clinical dietitian before I got pregnant, and it was a really long journey to get pregnant. And honestly, I didn't see myself becoming a registered dietitian. I didn't see myself finishing this process. It's a really intense process. It's for a 4-year degree or sometimes a master's. Now they're starting to require a master's, and then an internship, which is basically a residency program, and it's extremely competitive to get into them, and they're pretty expensive. And then follow that by a national exam. It's an intense process. And the whole time I was in school, I was trying to get pregnant, and it wasn't happening. And I just
Mhm.
figured, well, I'm enjoying these classes, but I'm going to get pregnant and then I'm going to stay home. And that's why I chose nutrition, because it's got so many different options. You can do a lot of different things with a nutrition degree. So even if I wasn't going to finish it, it would be good knowledge. So I kept going to school and I kept not getting pregnant, and I got an internship and I was not pregnant, and I passed the exam and I was not pregnant. And that was really painful. But now looking back on it, I can really appreciate what that journey did for me. I mean, I would, I can only say that from my perspective on my journey. You can never say that about someone else. You can never say, well, there's a purpose for this, because sometimes it's just too painful to hear that. But looking back on my own journey, I can see where the pieces fit together from this perspective. So, so finally, I convinced my husband that we needed to go to specialists, which we did, and had some therapies done, and ended up with twins.
Oh, how
Of
old are
course.
they?
Yeah, surprise. And then a really surprise bonus round. So now there are 3 boys. But the whole time my goal was to get pregnant. It wasn't to finish the degree. It wasn't to work from home. But once I got pregnant, I was about to have the kids, and I retired from clinical work, so to speak. I mean, now I'm back. But I went home, and at that point my focus was really, just having the kids, and I wasn't thinking about where I was going to take my degree at that moment. I was just planning to ride the waves. And there were a lot of waves to ride. I mean, infertility, and then a high risk pregnancy. We had tongue ties, lip ties, allergies, breastfeeding issues, feeding issues, sleeping issues, adenoids and tonsils and all this stuff. And one day when my twins were 6 months old, I said, wow, this has been a rough ride. I can probably help other people not have such a rough ride.
Mhm.
So I like to say that I try to help parents slide into parenthood more gracefully than I did.
I
Because
like
it was
that.
a rough ride. It was rough. And that's how I got into this. And from this point, it's always been from home, because I realized quickly that at first I was focused on counseling, and I couldn't get out of the house, and neither could my clients. If I've got 6-month-old twins at home and my client's got a 3-month-old, how are we going to meet? So we're just going to
Yeah.
do it on the phone. And so when the pandemic rolled around, I was already set up to be from home. It got a little more intense because my husband took over the office, since all of a sudden he was home too.
I hear you. This happened for us.
It happened for a lot of people. Yeah, but that's how I got into this. And some writing opportunities came my way, and especially with 2020, I just was saying yes to every cool opportunity, and I feel like it's gotten me pretty far. I just ditched the idea of a business plan. I understand that is not smart for probably most people, and it is probably not smart for me long term either. But short term, when everything's up in the air and I have some fun opportunities flying at me, why not just say yes to everything and see what sticks? So
How
that's
old are your kids right now?
doing. The, the twins are going to be 8 next month,
Okay.
and little guy is 4. So they're
So
they're more independent than they were.
they're not 6 months anymore.
No, thank God they grew.
Yeah, I'm starting to feel like I'm entering into this new era of my life. You over the years you always hear about the moms who basically stop working, while their children are home. But once they get to school age, that's when they re-enter the workforce. Now, I've been working all this time. Like I've worked through my children's entire life, but always from home. And even though I've been working this whole time, I've been working at nights and weird hours. And like we were talking about, having a difficult time sleeping sometimes. I'd be rolling around with just 2 hours of sleep under my belt, half the time. And now I feel like, oh my goodness, my kids are gonna all three be in school. Now, my daughter was supposed to be in kindergarten last year, and then that didn't happen. So she's gonna be entering first grade basically for her first, full school experience. She did a little preschool. But I'm like, oh my goodness, maybe I can, sleep like a normal person again. Like I haven't done that in 13 years.
Yeah.
And work in the daytime at the same time as my husband, so I'm not always having to tag team with him and never actually get to be with the family when they're all having family time.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. I always said, you're the best parent before you have kids, of course.
Of
I always said
course.
that I wouldn't be the couple that switches off. We want to spend time together. And
Mhm.
I did not understand the cost of babysitting when I said
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
So we do a lot of switching off, but I think that's the nature of marriage. It's the nature of having young kids. And it's also the nature of both parents being stuck at home working during a pandemic.
I like your little saying about you're the best parent before you have kids. I used to babysit and I'd nanny, and oh, I had lots of opinions about how I was going to do things when I, grew up and got married and had my own kids and all these things. And apparently some of these people told my mom, "Oh, April sure has some idealistic ideas about, what her family life is gonna be like in the future." And not just with them, but everybody. My mom, I have eaten my words so many times. I did my master's degree papers were about like the negative, um, detrimental effects of screen time on children.
Oh, that's a good one.
I was able to maintain, like no screens for my 2-year-old, my firstborn. And by the time she turned 2, I'm like, "Ooh, maybe we'll do some screens now." And my husband is like, "She has totally had screens. You just didn't know." And I'm like, and
Uh,
but at the same time, when she turned 2, our baby was turning 6 months old, and they just watched TV together. And yeah, by the time our 3rd kid came around, she could totally, like, program the DVD player or whatever. I mean, like
yeah. Yeah, we've got that too, for sure. Like the AAP recommends no added sugar in the first 2 years. And we have a joke among pediatric dietitians that that only applies to the first child. Because the thing is, you've got these warring ideas, like,
yeah.
do they need sugar? No, no, they don't need sugar. But if they're seeing their sibling have sugar and you tell them no, that's detrimental to their relationship.
Mhm.
There's sibling jealousy there. There's
Mm.
they're more likely to show food seeking issues later on because you
Yeah.
said no. Like,
Mm.
yes, okay, so we're battling the physical. This is like the argument between vitamin D and skin cancer. You cannot win that argument. Both sides
Right.
are right.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yes, you do need vitamin D for a lot of reasons, but yes, you should also not get skin cancer.
I feel like all of us are trying to do the best we have or the best we can with what we have. Um, though a lot of us that are not only parenting but also working, and meeting the needs of our clients in addition to the needs of our children, there's something's got to give.
Yeah.
Now, my mom was a stay-at-home mom for 10 years. No, not 10 years. My mom was a stay-at-home mom for like 30 years. Yeah, that's more accurate actually. She's still, parenting and being a full-time mom and grandma now to, the kids. But, you've got time to do things and to be more, I guess, intentional about like making all of your food from scratch when you're not working a 40-hour work week. And so I feel like, kind of like you're saying, the second kid, things might change. But when you're a working mom, something's got to give. And sometimes you do make a sacrifice or a
Yeah.
compromise.
Yeah. And the thing is that sometimes we have to reframe those sacrifices, because sacrifice makes you feel like I failed. I did not do what I wanted to do. And the thing is that maybe the initial goal was off base. Maybe the initial goal was too lofty. Maybe it was just too much. Maybe it was based on misinformation. So for example, making baby food from home. Great, go for it. But you should also know that the baby food that is at the store meets very strict safety requirements. It has a lot of variety as far as fruits and vegetables. The thing is, there are certain ingredients that are repeated over and over again, so you have to be focused on actually getting the variety. But if a jar of baby food has 4 different fruits and vegetables in it, you could do that at home, but it's going to be more expensive. It's going to be more difficult. You're going to have to store it. Looking at thinking of the food that comes pre-made as poison or junk or something that is subpar could really set you up for failure. Like, what if you have this idea in your mind and then one day you're coming home from work or from a doctor's appointment or whatever, and there's traffic, or there's an accident. It takes you forever to get home, and by the time you get home the child is screaming and you don't have the food made. Like, it's okay to have these fallbacks. It's okay to have processed food as a fallback, or even as just part of your life. That's okay. And when we start off with these crazy expectations of ourselves, we're not setting ourselves up for a win. We're not setting ourselves up to feel confident in our parenting.
Right. Yeah. And the same thing I'm sure can be applied to, the whole breastfeeding versus formula thing. A lot of people start off with the plan to breastfeed. And I think that with a lot of support, that can be, a great solution for most families. But then you've got, for some reason, whatever reason, that formula is another alternative option and then not to mention the postpartum depression that many people struggle with. Don't put it on yourself that you have to do this thing. And if it's not working out the way you originally planned, that you're a failure.
Yeah.
Give yourself grace. And look, you've got more than one option here.
Right. Yes. Give yourself grace, lean into what's working, and try to work around what's not working. It's interesting that you bring up breastfeeding specifically. I did have a lot of postpartum depression, specifically anxiety. I had
Mm-hmm.
very bad postpartum anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And once I got past the initial hurdles of breastfeeding with the appropriate help, that was the one thing that I felt like I was doing right.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, that was something to lean into. But for
Yeah.
someone else who feels bad about themselves every time they put the baby to the breast, either because it's not working for physical reasons or whatever reasons, we need to look at parenting as a whole. You're not made or broken as a parent by any single decision. You're not made as a parent by having a vaginal birth versus C-section, or
Mm-hmm.
breastfeeding over formula, or doing one method of feeding or another. It doesn't change who you are as a parent. A lot of these decisions are completely out of our hands, and we
Yeah.
need to show more compassion to ourselves and to each other.
Yeah, I agree. I want to talk a little bit more about your work from home situation. Now you had the twins, and then a couple years later, you had your third,
Yeah,
your boy mom.
I'm a boy mom.
um, how does that work? Do you have where do you work from?
Well, right now we are in my bedroom. Um, that was actually kind of a journey. That was a decision, because I had my office and my husband took it over. And the truth is that there would be room for both of us, but
Mm-hmm.
it's quite a mess in there. And I was working for most of the pandemic. I was working at the dining room table and I was going crazy, but I didn't want to move a desk into my room because you're not supposed to mix your energies. You shouldn't have your workspace in the place where you're sleeping. And you know what? But we shouldn't have a pandemic. And so all of that goes out the window.
Yep.
When I finally moved this folding table into my bedroom in the corner and put my laptop on it and claimed it, put my flag down, claimed it as my place, it was such a relief. I have a door I can close.
Mhm.
There's a separation for me and the kitchen, for example. My kids are old enough that they can take care of themselves for an hour while I am having a meeting in my bedroom.
Yep.
So that's okay. And I needed to just ignore this idea of mixing energies, because what works for one person doesn't work for another. Maybe this is not a good idea for a lot of people, but for me, this is working out pretty nicely.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think, I haven't heard of the mixing energies. I'm not sure where you heard that, but, I do know that I have been a little bit nervous at times about working, um, in my bedroom more for, like, privacy, security reasons,
Mhm.
but it actually works out quite well for my husband because he's never on camera, so no one's gonna see, like, me asleep on the bed, for instance, so it works out. Um, are Can you talk a little bit about your workflow? Like, are you usually, like, doing a Zoom, or are you usually writing? Like, where is this usually happening?
Well, I have this writing method that I'm patenting. It's called working in the cracks. I think a lot of parents are familiar with that. I'm very efficient at writing. I can write very quickly. So so what I was doing is just every time I have a moment, just sitting down and writing. And that's not it's not the most efficient for a lot of people. I just found that I didn't have many other options, especially when my office was downstairs at the dining room table. Now
Mhm,
that I've moved my office and I have more dedicated space, I can sit and work for a chunk of time, which
mhm.
is so much better. If I'm with a client, I'm probably on a Zoom. I love this face to face. It's great. I
Yeah.
prefer that over just phone calls.
Mhm,
And if I'm writing, it's just me with my window cracked open for some natural light and some
mhm.
white noise in my ears sometimes. And I just sit down with my cup of tea and have at it.
Tell me about your white noise solution. I might need more white noise in my life.
Yeah, I really like the sounds of rain, which is great because it's raining right now here. So
Mhm.
that's
It's
wonderful. That
unusual, by the way, for Arizona. We are in a drought. We were in a severe drought, and so this rain is really appreciated.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. I'm planning to dance around in it later. Definitely with the kids. You know, we should always look for opportunities to have fun with the kids. But yeah, so I have this app. I forgot what the app is called. My phone's downstairs, but I think it's just called like a white noise app, and it's free. And I just put the sounds of rain in my ears and turn it up. So and it helps me to focus.
I really like that because the solution that I have had is, actually, this is more for my husband than it is for me, but right now I'm in my office closet, and the door to my, left here is I'm pointing probably to my right on the camera, but it's my, bathroom, and then there's another door that goes into our bedroom. Well, I was making a lot of noise when I was teaching English, sometimes 10 hours overnight during my husband's sleeping hours, and he'd have to get up and, work as well. Um, Singing heads and shoulders, knees and toes, and, just like really obnoxious sounds. I even have this melodica thing. It's kind of like a musical instrument that you like
Oh
play like a
yeah,
piano and a
that's
clarinet kind
fun.
or a recorder at the same time is pretty obnoxious. And I'm playing that, all night. And he's like, I'm having a hard time sleeping. And, and as I tried to put a box fan in the room with him, and he found that irritating. And he liked it best when we had the exhaust fan running in our bathroom, and we'd have both doors closed. And so it wasn't super loud for either of us, but it just kind of gave a little bit of a sound barrier. But I find that sound really irritating. Like, the sound of that fan is just I think the natural sound, like rain, would be maybe something that I could handle longer.
Yeah, I like that. They're also ocean waves, and I don't like the ocean waves because they come and go,
Mhm,
and the rain is more of a consistent sound.
mhm.
But everyone's got their thing, you know?
Yeah. Like, I do hear my kids, when I'm working while they're awake and they're shrieking or yelling or fighting, and it is kinda nice having my husband in the bedroom office because he's, like, the first line of defense, and they'll go bother him first. He's not forward or camera facing as often as I am,
Right.
but we actually kind of have, like, a whole code with our kids, like, okay, um, if mom and dad are gonna be in meetings at the same time, we'll always tell them which person that they could come to if they had an emergency. Mommy's gonna be in a meeting, but it's an informal meeting. She's not recording a podcast, so come and talk to mom. Or daddy is in a meeting, but he's just listening and he's not on, a microphone. So go ahead. If you have anything, you can whisper it to him. Sometimes that's when we break out our screen time and we'll be like, "Hey kids, you know how you haven't watched TV for 3 weeks? Well, today you can." And you can watch garbage. You can watch and we actually have, like, this whole system of, like, level 10 education means, like, straight up documentary. Level 9 is, like, our, Octonauts and Wildcrats and the cartoony, like, educational shows. And then they know, like, they have a whole ranking system, they know what shows are level 3, and so, like, if we ever say that they may watch anything under level 5, they're, like, glued to the TV for, like, 3 hours, whatever we need. Um, and we pull that out of our back pocket, like, only, like, maybe once every 2 months, because when we
Yeah.
do, then it really works.
Right,
What do
right.
you do?
Too much, it doesn't work. Yeah. I I don't bribe my kids with food. I do sometimes with experiences,
Mhm,
so and here's the difference. I told them they were fighting a lot yesterday, and that was really difficult for me. So I told them, if you can get along today during my meetings, then we're going to go out for Italian soda.
ooh,
And we go to the coffee shop and they get to pick their flavor. And this is fun.
mhm,
This is a new thing for us because I didn't realize we keep kosher, so we can't eat everywhere. But a lot
mhm,
of these coffee shops stock those syrups, the Torani syrups, which are
yep,
kosher, and it's fine. We make an Italian soda, but they have all of these options, and it's so exciting for them. But the key is that the soda isn't the bribe. It's the all going out together to get the Italian soda. We
right,
have flavored bubbly water here that they could enjoy. That's not
mhm.
the draw. So it's kind of a fine line. You have to know what works with your kids and then rotate treats so that nothing gets too old. And of course, I'm not advising bribery all the time. It's one of those things where we, you say I would never bribe my kids, and then there's reality.
Well, and it doesn't always even have to be related to food at all.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I have learned about myself is that I think that I was raised or just as a personal practice all these years have always had food as a reward.
Yeah.
If I do well, I get food. If I do badly and I'm feeling sad or depressed or anxious or anything, it's again food. And I found myself doing that with my kids when they were younger, and someone talked to me about it. Someone who I had invited into my life to talk with me, accountability with food, and she just said, "Be careful that you don't also put that on your kids because that can create a pattern for them as well." And
Yeah.
so we do often, just you said, like have an experience or a special something, but sometimes that special something is just special time, like we're gonna go
Yeah.
to a park,
Sure.
and it's just gonna be you and me, or we're gonna go for a drive, and maybe on that drive, we'll go ahead and get, like, a hot chocolate from Starbucks or something like that, but usually it's just more the time, and we focus on that, the relationship building aspect rather than, like, the reward being food.
Yeah, that's a much healthier way to be. I mean, sometimes food is going to be the only thing that you have at your hand, and you've got 2 hours of sleep under your belt, and so that's fine. But even with potty training, a lot of people do M&Ms. You know
Yep.
what? Sometimes do M&Ms, but sometimes do stickers, and sometimes
Yeah.
do a Hot Wheels car or something,
Mhm.
or a coloring book. Change it up, because you're right. By offering food as a reward or as a punishment, using it as a punishment, like no dessert because of behavior. It doesn't create a healthy relationship with food. If
Mhm.
you're serving dessert, everyone gets dessert. That's
Yeah.
it.
Oh, potty training was a unique one for us because we found out in that process that we were doing the M&Ms, and also we had, collected all of our Halloween candy, and we, kind of were rationing it out very slowly over the course of, like, a month or 2, and then, that moved into Valentine's Day, so then we got the Valentine's treats, and we're using these. We found out that our kid was extremely sensitive to food dye. And I always gave my kid food dye every single day for, like, months, and we couldn't figure out why was she the kid that was running like a banshee through the Montessori preschool, and all the other kids are sitting, politely and, respectfully at their tables. Uh, yeah, so that was, I think when I start to hear people talking about, "What is going on with my kid? Why are they so angry? And they're just 3, and they're just started potty training." And I'm like, "Are you doing food dye treats?" Because that was a thing for us. It's not for everybody, but
Right.
there is a subset of children who are gonna be very sensitive to that.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. It's also very difficult to identify behavioral triggers. with food. They definitely exist, but it's difficult to identify because when you make a change in a child's diet, you're looking for a result. And looking for a result means paying more attention to that child. And so the change in behavior is sometimes the food and is sometimes the change in attention. And
Mhm.
maybe it's sometimes, if it was the beginning of the pandemic and all of a sudden we're home, maybe it's also something having to do with that. So it can
Right.
be really tricky. And what I find is that sometimes parents take that like we like to do everything to the best of our ability possible, right? So why don't we eliminate all of the stuff, all of it, just eliminate all of it. It's not good for kids to do that. When you're experimenting with a child's diet, it has to be done in a very delicate way to avoid any negativity associated with that. And the truth is that now that that particular child is sensitive to food dye, and sometimes it's going to be worth it to give that child something that's got food dye in it. You're just going to know to expect the result.
Yep.
And that's good to have too. Sometimes you're
Yep.
going to be at a birthday party
Yep.
and everyone's going to have a piece of cake. So either you're going to come prepared with a piece of cake that has no food dye, or
Mhm.
you're going to just let your kid have cake with the rest of the kids and just know that you should plan the rest of your day around whatever the consequence will be.
In our case, the next 3 or 4 days. And so we would have
Oh,
to make that decision based on if it's a Friday and they have big testing on Monday, we might have to say we're gonna have to find an alternative. If it's
yeah.
a Friday and it's, summer break, we might be able to weather that storm.
Right, right. I mean, since we keep kosher, we always bring our own food to
Mm,
birthday parties. So my kids are used to that. That's just part of it. That's part of our religious observance, and they're used to that. I'll call ahead and find out what's being served and bring the closest approximation they can do. That's
yeah,
okay for families. It's important for kids to feel like they belong. And so bringing the same food that's being served, but a version that's safer for your child
yep.
it'll work more towards helping your child feel part of the crowd, which is so important at that age, while also minding what their medical needs are.
We were doing that, something like that when we were at, our original we were in an original, I wanna say public charter school, and it was birthday snacks all the time, and a lot of them were things that really my kids shouldn't have had, and so the teacher would, call me or text me or email me and say, "Hey, we're having donuts today. Do you wanna bring a alternative?" And I was like, "Yes," and at some point, I just had, like, a whole pack of cupcakes that weren't gonna expire for, like, 2 weeks or something that she could just pull
Yeah,
out one if she needed for, a couple of days, but that was a little tricky because we didn't want her to feel left out, but we didn't want her she was not, we didn't know some of the tips and tricks that we don't now, and so, the threshold for that was pretty small, I guess. When we moved to our second public charter school, they didn't allow treats in the classroom. There were no sugar treats, even in lunches, they weren't supposed to have sugar as a main ingredient in anything, and so people got a little interesting, got creative. So if they were celebrating a birthday, the birthday kid might bring in snap or slap bracelets or, fun pencils with cool erasers or something that, the non-food things that
yeah,
exist for party favors, or, we just celebrate with a song and it didn't have to always be centered around food, which was so wonderful. We are actually leaving that school and starting, going back to a public school and everything is free game at this new school, but I feel like my kids know enough now and are old enough, and they understand some of their actions that they are able to advocate for themselves,
yeah.
and, we can come prepared, and I feel like that the 3 or 4 years of relief that I had from that experience, I think, has given me enough, bandwidth to be able to be ready to to have those alternatives ready, or, if the kids will know what to ask or what to say sometimes when they need to, if there's, like, a surprise in the classroom.
Right.
But yeah. Okay, going back to working from home. What tools are you using that make working from home easier for you? Like when you're writing, what are you writing into? Or when you're communicating, are you using Zoom? I think I already asked you that.
I like to use Zoom when I'm on one-on-one with a client. But when I'm writing, I'm really enjoying Google Docs. I think
Mhm.
it's amazing. I do a lot of collaborating with other dietitians and other allied professionals, and I just love how we can all be in the same document at the same time.
Yep.
And
Yep.
my co-author for Beyond a Bite, Hannah, we've only met actually in real life twice, which is crazy because we talk on the phone all the time and we're in collaborating together. So I really like that. I'm also very paranoid about losing my content on my computer. So
Yep.
I put everything in my Google Drive,
Yep.
and I find that it's so convenient. I can access it from anywhere. If I need to access something from the hospital, I can. And so I use that a lot. I just have my laptop. I'm pretty bare bones with this. I mean,
Yeah.
we've been chatting over the past few days about the microphones, and I just got my new fancy microphone. I mean, you weren't the first to suggest it, but you definitely were the straw that broke the camel's back on that.
We had a fun conversation yesterday because she sent me a picture holding the new microphone, but she said she did a test recording and she couldn't hear. Um, and so she didn't know why didn't the sound go through, because it looked as though the microphone was working. So I was like, hey, do you mind if I video call you? And I just went through, I think we used Facebook Messenger, and
Yeah,
just turned the camera around, and I'm just looking at her settings with her, and all she had to do was unplug the microphone, right?
right.
And then whatever settings were readjusting made it so that we did find out that the sound works just fine.
Yeah, but it was great. Like we have that. It's nice that people have that, like there's this account I follow on Instagram called Proportional Plate, and Candace Walker, she's a chef. She's amazing. Her stuff is beautiful. But I tried to do one of her recipes and it wasn't working. And I messaged her and I was like, I can't get this to work. What is wrong with me? And she hopped on a Zoom with me and my little guy and troubleshooted the recipe with me. And this is someone I didn't know personally. And that was her idea, to just feel like, hey, let's just get on a call. Like, okay.
Yeah, I like that. It's always a good idea to ask permission first, especially if you're going to do like a video call, because I have had people just to answer a question just send me a video like invite and it's like ringing, and I'm like, I am not wearing an appropriate top for this conversation. And give me a minute, but yeah, I do like the technology sometimes can feel a little invasive if people use it a little bit, you know without that, is it all right if I give you a call? But I'm glad it worked out yesterday. That was really fun.
Yeah.
And we were talking a little bit about, I think, the shock mount and
Yes.
the tripod, and how do they connect, and do they connect, can they connect, we actually put the shock mount on the microphone and then put on the tripod and realized that it's not actually shock mounting because it's still connected to the bottom of the microphone. It was just like a decoration.
So I put it in a coffee cup and it worked for yesterday. And now I have a
Yeah.
stand coming tonight.
That's by 10 o'clock. Amazon is amazing. When I was starting to do a video, I was trying to use my Canon camera to do like with eCam and like a higher quality camera than this little Logitech that I use now. But I was like overnighting, cords and connections and dangles and dongles and, whatever, who's it's and was it's. But yeah, Amazon has been my friend through the pandemic as far as getting equipment.
Yeah.
So you podcast, you want to talk about
Yes.
that?
Yeah. So I started Naptime Nutrition when I think the boys were about a year old. And I have, I think, about 175 videos on my YouTube channel now, which is called Naptime Nutrition. And some of those have gone podcast, and hopefully more of them. It takes a long time to edit them, but we were talking about ways I can maybe outsource that. But yeah, the Naptime Nutrition podcast is coming along nicely. And I just cover all things parenting and nutrition, and some things that are kind of loosely associated. Like a few weeks ago, I did a segment on what to do if your child is being bullied. And it was specifically on what to do if your child's being bullied about their weight, but it's the same if they're being bullied about something else.
Mm-hmm.
So I interviewed a child therapist for that. And hopefully that's going to be my next podcast coming out. But the video is available on
Mm-hmm.
YouTube now.
Do you usually do a interview format like this, or are you usually doing a solo episode?
It's been more interview than solo. Sometimes it's solo. It depends on the topic and if I can cover it effectively. I didn't feel like I could cover that topic effectively because that was much more in the therapy side of things. And I'm not a therapist. So it's good
Mm-hmm.
to have that extra voice on. And I think it also makes it more entertaining for the listener to hear different perspectives.
Yeah.
A lot of times, especially with childhood nutrition and with parenting, there's a lot of overlap between nutrition and therapy. And so I've had a number of therapists on just to talk about different angles. And so I can address it from the nutrition angle, and they can address it from the mental health, social health angle. And I think
How
that gives us a
Oh, go
more
ahead.
comprehensive product.
How do you find your network? Are they people that you already know, or are you reaching out to people?
A lot of people I've met online, just through social networking in professional circles, and that's worked out really well. I can't say that most of my guests I've met in person, but they've just impressed me with their content online. And we talk a while before, we interact for a while. And if a subject comes up and I think that they are the expert to get me where I want to be and get the message to the audience that needs to be gotten there, then I'll invite them on. And it's worked out really well.
I did kind of a shot in the dark the other day into the local Facebook group. The group that I'm in actually has mostly local moms, but some of them have moved on and just have stayed in the group. But I was like, does anyone have it in their bucket list to be in a podcast? I just am looking for a few people who specifically work, for organization or you're obviously kind of doing both. You're working in the hospital and you've got like that, and you've also got your home business.
Mm-hmm.
Is this all you, or are you working in a community of people collaborating? You said that you do a co-authoring with some of your books.
Yeah, I do a lot of co-authoring. I really do like writing in a tandem fashion. So I have a WhatsApp group that is a lot of other professionals, and I collaborate with them a lot. I honestly, I just roll with it. It's funny. My father is, he raised me to be an entrepreneur, and he raised me with these ideas of how to run a business. And I just find that not having a plan works, and not like, I vet people fairly minimally before they come on. I mean, because I'm interacting with them and I'm seeing the content they put out. But I'm taking this very loose approach with my business. Just, try this and try that. And I'm glad that I have the freedom. I understand that there are privileges that allow me to do that. But I find that that's really what's shaped my business in the best way, rather than having some kind of set idea on what I want it to look like. I just try to keep my mind open and keep myself open to all these possibilities and collaborations. And it's working well for me. So I'm just going to keep doing that.
For people who are thinking about trying to build a network, especially entrepreneurs who, if you're working online and you don't, have maybe a community in person, podcasting is actually a really cool way to get to know some people. There's usually a little bit of chat before we get started. Then we've got this whole, some people do a 15-minute, I do an hour interview. And then usually there's a little bit of chit chat, wrapping things up, talking about if there's any edits that we need to make, anything like that afterward. And sometimes that's a, very brief conversation, just 5 minutes before, 5 minutes after. Sometimes it's a half hour or an hour. And I really feel like this has been a really nice way to vet the people that I might want to work with in the future. So thank you for being willing to just come. We didn't know each other and come on in. Um, do you have any local people that you meet with regularly in your profession, or is it usually just all online?
It's funny. There are people I meet with locally, but it's just as convenient as meeting with people who are elsewhere, because we haven't been social. Like, I haven't been outwardly social. So yeah, I do have a friend who I meet with regularly for business ideas and accountability and all of that. And she's local, but we've been meeting on Zoom anyway. So
Right? Yeah. Sometimes it's just more
uh,
convenient, especially with little ones and at
yeah.
home. Well, what about your social life then, outside of your professional life? Do you feel like you are able to maintain that when you're working from home? Not just during the pandemic, but like all the time.
Sorry, my what?
Your social life. Your what?
You know
Yeah.
what? I find that I gravitate toward people that I kind of end up collaborating with. So a lot of my relationships are a little bit mixed. For the past year, I've been homeschooling with a friend of mine, and thank God she was an actual teacher before leaving to
Oh,
have a
wow.
family.
Mm-hmm.
And so we mixed our friendship that way, that she became my kid's teacher.
Mm-hmm.
But I've pitched a book idea to my publisher, and she'll be my co-author. It just happens for me that way, that people I
Yeah.
surround myself with happen to be people who we also have this in common, and we can build on each other's experiences or even on each other's businesses. So my relationships are just a little bit fluid like that.
How did that
And I think
work with
we
your
like
kiddos?
collaborate
Did
and become good friends.
Yeah,
So
yes, of course.
yeah.
When you were, doing the shared homeschooling experience, were your kids going to this person's home?
Hmm. Yeah. So she had her kids and my kids, and I was there as the assistant teacher for half the day, and then I'd leave and go work at home for the other half.
Wow, how many kids was that in total then?
It was six.
Mhm.
Yeah, it worked out well, but her youngest was 8 months when we started. So it's a challenging age while
Yeah.
trying to teach other groups of ages.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
wasn't perfect, but it was as close to perfect as we could have possibly gotten, and I have no regrets.
You're the second person that I've interviewed who has talked about having a similar situation with the mom who was working more hours from home would basically shuttle the kids over to the other person's home who turn into like their full-time teacher or more like a proxy because some of them are doing online teaching, but I think going forward they might just straight up homeschool
Yeah,
because it
we're
worked
not
really
going to
well.
continue.
Cut out the middleman.
Yeah, we're not going to continue with homeschooling.
Yeah. We aren't either.
No, I mean, more power to people who make that decision. That's great. It's not the right decision for my family.
Yeah. Yeah. How many hours are you typically working from home right now in the past year versus before versus what are you planning on in the future?
Yes,
That
it's a
was like
good
3
idea to track
questions.
how
It was
much
like
time.
triple. Yeah. It's a
Yeah,
good
that would be a good idea to track time.
yeah.
I'm
I
just
hear
gonna
you.
smile and nod. I don't really know the
Um,
answer to that question. Like I write in the cracks. It's not the most efficient, and I don't know how
mhm,
much time I dedicate to each project, which can be a problem when taxes come around and you're trying to write off different things for different projects.
right.
I would like to get better at that, but right now that's not where I am. And
You
I
know
just
what?
deal
I'm
with
with you. So Yafi, tell me a little bit about do you have people who are like, "Oh, I wish I could work at home like you." Do you give advice to people who are wanting to join you in this lifestyle, or do you have advice for people who are interested in trying to make it work long term now that the pandemic is changing people's work situations?
Yeah, I think it really depends on what people's needs are and what their goals are. For example, I would love to have one of those she sheds. I'm kind of obsessed with this idea, but it's going to take $15,000 to build me my own office in the backyard. That's not something that's possible right now. So you got to start small. If you're transitioning from a more traditional life, maybe you want to make that a slow transition. Like for instance, if someone's working at the hospital and wants to start a private practice, take on a couple of clients and see how it feels and see how much you like it. A lot of times you're going to be making that shift away from a job that is giving you benefits that are good. So make sure you do all of your research and
Mhm.
know what you're getting into, you know what your costs are, and make the transition as slowly as you need to maintain your own sanity and confidence. And then start off small. If you don't need something big and fancy and expensive, then put it off a little bit. And if you need it, then get it.
Yeah.
You know, ask for advice. If you need to find something cheaper, go on Facebook and ask what other people have done. That's a
Yeah.
great use of Facebook.
Yes, yes. We actually didn't have any laptop at all when I started teaching English as a second language, and because I was just kind of doing it on the fly. I ended up asking my network, does anyone have an extra laptop that I could borrow for a month or so, or even just a week, just so I could do the interview, and then I would pull it together and get one. I ended up borrowing the laptop from a lady for 4 months, and then
Wow.
that gave me enough time to buy the computer I wanted, not just like the cheapest one on the market. So
Yeah.
that's really good advice. Thank you.
Yeah. I've just found it's amazing when, like are you in that group She Podcasts?
No, but it sounds like one I should be in.
Oh, I just assumed you were in that. No, you should be
No.
in that one. Yeah, there's a group She Podcasts, and they have so many members and so many posts. You could just search for anything. I mean, if you want equipment, what everyone's experience is with different equipment, it can get a little overwhelming just because everyone has something to say and everyone's so willing to contribute to the conversation.
When you decided on your microphone that you bought last week or that you ordered last week, how did you make that decision? Because I think I had recommended two that people have.
Yeah.
I told you about the one that I have. I told you about one I've heard about, and then I told you about one that Matthew Stubblefield is my friend who does a lot of research. Did you got the one that I think Matthew Stubblefield had?
I don't remember which one. I got one of them that you sent me, and I was
Mhm.
cross-referencing what you were saying with what I was finding in the group. And at
Okay.
some point, I was just like, I don't need anything that fancy. This is going to be fine.
The decision has been made.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes you just don't need to put that much thought into something, you
Mhm.
know? I've been working with my AirPods for a while, and you said I'll have a big, increase in quality with this microphone, and I believe you, I trust you. I'm not sure that there would be a huge difference if I had chosen a different microphone.
That's
So I
probably true
didn't
too.
want to put that I wanted to put the appropriate amount of thought into it. We overthink everything. We're programmed to
Yeah.
overthink everything, especially as parents. So we need to choose to not overthink when we can choose to not overthink.
Well, it's kinda nice having a friend like, I interviewed Matthew, like, I think he was interview number 4 for me, months ago now, and he's the kind of person who enjoys the research process, and I do to some extent, but at some point, if Matthew has already researched that, I'm just gonna go with his recommendation because he probably put weeks into that, and I only wanna put, like, 1 minute into that decision.
Right.
Um, sometimes, the price point, of course, is gonna be a factor, but all
Yeah.
right, any last thoughts before we wrap up today?
Be kind to yourself and be kind to your neighbors. We really need a little more kindness in the world, and I think if we all start with our families and our friends, then it can just spread from there, and we can all benefit.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Yaffi. This has been a fun conversation, and I hope that we can maybe continue this conversation another time.
Definitely. Thank you so much for having me, April.
All right, well, this has been April Malone with Yaffi Lvova, and we'll see you next time. Bye.